Brian Davis, Home Improved Man. Got a fun one today. I'm going to be, actually this video will span over a few days, but I'm going to take you through putting in ceiling tiles. Just in this particular situation, wanted something a little more interesting in the room, and we decided the way to achieve that would be by putting a little more, I guess, design texture elements up on the ceiling. And when I began to look into it, found that it's not prohibitively expensive if you don't want it to be. And so I'm going to take you through that process. A couple things that you want to consider if you're looking at this route. When I put this ceiling in here, there was no ceiling there. I was replacing the ceiling. And so what that meant was I had the ability to center the lights on the ceiling tiles, which helps to, I guess, create the visual continuity. Might not be the right way of phrasing it, but if your ceiling lights are dramatically offset or change with these ceiling tiles, it's going to add a little bit of a unsettling feeling to the whole thing. Now, you don't have to, you're not required, or let's say, that doesn't mean that you can only use this when you are going to put in a whole new ceiling. It just means you need a plan around it. You can still do it, especially if you only have one break in the ceiling, one center light or ceiling fan or whatever. Then it becomes really easy to do. The other thing to consider with this type of tile, these ceiling tiles, is how they end at the wall. Traditionally, there would be some sort of crown molding that you would see at the edges. And so planning for that becomes important. As you can see over here, there is a bit of a gap. And that is where the crown molding is going to line up. You can run the ceiling tile all the way to the wall. I'm not really sure how it's going to work. I'm going to do it on this side, but that's because I've got a different feature going in over here. And so we'll see how it ends up looking. I've got I'm basically boxing out this frame right here so that I can put some lights in there. So no crown molding on this side, crown molding on this side, but it is something that you want to know beforehand. Now what I'm using is this tile. It's made from styrofoam. It's lightweight, of course. It's fairly easy to cut and to work with. When the tile is up there, I think it looks pretty good. I am planning on painting it, and I think that's going to really do a much better job of camouflaging its original material. I think that once it's done, you won't be able to tell what the material is. And that's another important thing to consider. When I go to paint this, I can't use a roller. A brush would be weird. I'm going to be spraying it. And I can't imagine doing anything but spraying the ceiling. I think it would be really difficult to get a clean, smooth finish. I think the roller would have trouble getting into the grooves. I think that a brush is going to leave strokes. So if you're thinking on this route, consider how you're going to finish it. You may not need to. A lot of these tiles come with in different colors. And I'm not sure how that would really work, because one of the final stages in this is going to be putting caulk in all of the seams. And so if you have a colored tile, unless you've got colored caulk to match, it's not going to work. So think about your finishing, think about your edge, and think about your features in your ceiling and how you are going to incorporate those into the pattern that you're creating in your tile. So let's get started. We're just on the other side of the room. You can see over there. That's where I was standing just a moment ago, back there. And now we're over here. I've got this feature here, this air duct that is creating a division between the two rooms, and so the tile is not going to meet there. So it gives me the ability to treat them essentially as two separate rooms. Now I can't get too crazily offset from one side to the other because as your eye travels across the line, if it's a big jump one way across there, you'll notice it. But if it's just a small few inches or whatever, you won't be able to pick up on that. But it does give me then the ability to make this video on a virgin ceiling. As I said, it's a new ceiling. I spent a lot of time in the preparation for this, and this is really, really important for any type of work that you do here. The more time you spend preparing and setting up, the easier the job is going to be. When I set these cans, it was with the understanding that I want each of the cans to be in the center of one of the tiles. So that means I need the distance from the cans that are in the ceiling to be exact, to be perfect where they are relative to each other. The other thing you want to consider is how they want to end at the wall. For me, I wasn't as concerned by that because of the crown molding. But if that is a concern of yours, you want to think about that. It is really, it does. I mean, it was hard. It was a little stressful. Did I measure right? Did I calculate it correctly? Coming out a couple times, laying the ceiling tiles on the floor, and actually measuring out the ceiling tiles and seeing how they all work out. I think I got it. Now, in order to begin, you're not going to start at a wall. You're going to start at your central feature. In this case, I'm going to be starting with one of the lights, with one of these tiles. And so what I did was I placed the tile over the ceiling, over the hole, and then I measured from this edge all the way back to the wall. And from the wall to this edge of the tile is 51 1/8 inch. I then went to the tile over here, which you can't see behind the camera. I went to this tile all the way back over here, there, that one, and I made sure that when I take this ceiling tile and I place it loosely over the light, not glued in yet, that it is 51 1/8 inches off of this wall over here. Now I have a line, and I'm going to snap a chalk line along that 51 1/8 mark all the way down the ceiling. And then the first row, I'm going to place the edge of it up against that. That will ensure that I get a straight line. Chalk lines there. You can probably see it faintly in the video. Right about there. Okay, so not only is the tile important, but the adhesive is important. They're very particular. When you read the descriptions, they'll tell you that the type of adhesive you use is really essential, that it's going to actually hold these tiles up. What I've been using is this Loctite heavy-duty power grab. I had to pull a couple of them down because I made a bad measurement, and it was tough to get them down. They were really holding up. The tile broke well before the adhesive did, so I'm confident this one's going to work for me. Last aspect that I think I want to address as far as the design and the aesthetics is the style of the tile. This style is not your traditional ceiling tile. They tend to be a little more geometric, but the atmosphere we were going for in this room, we wanted something a little more organic in its shape, curves and spirals and all that, and this one is going to work really well for that aspect. I think a lot of times people try and get very creative with the features of the room and don't pay enough attention to how the different features are going to work together. So really give some thought about how it's going to work. As you can see here, we're getting there. Now you've got a little bit of a gap right here. It's not horrible. This line will get caulked. And so the seam is going to disappear a little bit. And what that means is that if you get one or two slightly off where the gap changes slightly, it's going to disappear with the caulk. But you have to be careful with that. Don't look at that as permission to get sloppy. All right, so you need to make sure that you're as clean as possible. Always start off your chalk line, right there. Use that chalk line to keep you straight, and of course you'll start from the middle. So the caulk, it's pretty simple. All you do is put it about a quarter-size circle and then build it up like a soft serve ice cream cone to about 3/4 or an inch tall. And I'm going to put 3 dots on each line for a total of 9 dots. And then to put it into place, as you'll see, just getting it lined up with the edge tiles and pressing firmly where the caulk is on the other side, of course. When you're first setting it, you can wiggle it around a little bit to get it set in place. The more of the dots of caulk that you press into the ceiling, the more difficult it's going to be to move. So by the time you get to the last few pieces of caulk or adhesive, you want to make sure the tile is where you want it to be. Trying to move it around once it's fully adhered to the ceiling gets more and more difficult, and of course as it cures becomes exceptionally difficult until you get to the point where if you want to change it, you're going to have to pull it off and start over again. Now, taking a look at how everything lines up, as I mentioned earlier, I got most of the ceiling penetrations to center on the tile because I was able to plan ahead. It didn't always work out quite so well. There were things that were beyond my control. As you can see here, this one is centered in this direction, but offset in this direction. It doesn't look horrible. It could be better, but it was, as I said, beyond my control. It was the way that features lined up within the room. So just really paying attention to how important is it going to be to you that everything lines up. If it's going to be super important, then spend a lot of time in the beginning getting everything where you want it to be. And if decide for yourself, is something like that going to be acceptable to you or not? Well, we've got the ceiling placed, and for the most part, pretty happy with it. There are 2 things that I want to point out, 2 things that I learned in the process that would have made this a little bit easier. The first is that it's really helpful to use a sharp knife. This, you can see those edges, was cut with a dull knife. This was cut with a sharp knife. Now we're going to, as I mentioned, caulk the edges, and for those particular circles, those were going over the lights, or going underneath the lights there. And so the fact that there's a rougher edge is not so important, but when I cut the straight lines, I was having the same jagged edges. And in fact, I think you can see having a straight line is going to be more important. The other thing that I learned is that a utility knife is too bulky to be able to get close to the edge. I want to be pretty exact with the edges or the marks that I'm making and the lines that I'm cutting. And the utility knife, I couldn't get close enough to my straight edge to be able to really cut it well. Now, part of the problem is that I was using a level. If I had a metal ruler, like a speed square or a drywall square, then that would have been possible. But given the fact that I was using the level, that wasn't the case. So what I did is I took a blade and I attached it to a very thin piece And this is something I've used for edging paint before. I was actually looking for a shim. I was going to tape the blade to a shim so I could get right up to the edge of the level. So lesson there is either to use a flatter straight edge, such as a ruler, metal ruler of course, or to use a blade that allows you to get right up to the edge of the level. If you look here, I'm not going to box out that duct. I'm going to keep the duct exposed, and so I wanted to get the ceiling tile right up against the duct. And so 1/16 of an inch is what I was really aiming for. Now I'm not going to get there exactly, and so I figure if I aim for 1/16 of an inch off, figure that there's about 1/8 of an inch in either direction that I'm probably going to move around a little bit. It's still a pretty tight seam, and I'm really happy with the way it came out, and so being exact was very important. The other thing that I want to point out, and I'm going to allow you to learn from my mistakes, is if you recall, I had that chalk line running down here, and then I went and I I started laying the tile off of that chalk line. Everything went well, and I'm very happy with it, except that my gap here is incorrect. When I measured the first one, I got my 2 1/4 inches, which is what I want for my crown molding, and then I just ran. I assumed, my mistake, I assumed that that chalk line was going to stay parallel to this edge of the wall, and it didn't. It moved. And so now I think I may have measured incorrectly the first time, and that might have been the problem, but if I had gone and checked any of the other tiles, I would have seen my mistake and I could have corrected it, but I didn't. So now I have tile that extends too close to the wall, and I have to go up there and cut it. Now this tile is easy to cut, so it's not a horrible mistake, easy to rectify, but if I had been a little more patient in the laying of my tile, then I would have been, I could have saved myself that step. So don't do that. So this is a little experiment to see if the audio quality of the room can be picked up by the microphone of this camera. And I'm going to be putting in those ceiling tiles in this room next. And we noticed that when we put the ceiling tiles in, you could hear the echo go away just from the shape of the tiles, which was an added benefit we hadn't anticipated. And so I'm hoping that with this recording, and then doing another recording after the installation of the tiles, that we'll be able to hear the change in the audio quality, so I can share this little insight with you. Well, we've finished the tiling of the ceilings in this room, as you can see. And from my ear, there's a pretty dramatic difference in terms of the quality of the sound. We'll see if the camera picks it up. And the reason why that would be is that we've taken what was originally a flat surface, and we've given some undulation, some change in direction, so the sound doesn't bounce directly off. It gets shifted around the room a little bit more. And of course, this is what happens when you throw furniture into a room. One of the other ways that you can decrease the echo in a room is with fabric, things like drapes. And of course, some furniture is covered in fabric, and so that will help as well. It was an interesting little side benefit to these ceiling tiles, especially since I have some larger rooms that won't have the opportunity for a lot of fabric or furniture. So this should help mitigate some of the sound issues. All right, moving on to the next stage. We are now going to caulk the seams. A couple things that I found to be very helpful. The first is to cut a pretty good angle on the tip of it. Clean it off a little, right there. So that as you run through the seam, through the groove, it gets it in deeply without leaving a large amount on top that needs to be smeared across. And that leads into the second thing, and this one is super helpful. Less is better than more. It's easier to go back and put in a little bit more caulk than it is to clean off a big glob. once it starts smearing around the surface, it gets really hard to get it clean and to get it smooth again. And that's our ultimate goal, because I am going to be painting this. Maybe you're not. If you're not painting it, then it's even more important that you get really clean on the end, or at the end of it. As you're smearing it in, go very lightly with the finger, and you'll find it takes a little while to find the amount of pressure to get a smooth valley, a really even, I guess, just a trough to the wave. And once you get it, it's pretty satisfying. Pay particular attention to the places where the seams cross. Spend a little more time getting those clean. And then when you'll be a lot happier with the final product. One more thing about this experience is be methodical. Find a pattern so that as you lay down the caulk line and then you go back and smear it with your finger, that you don't miss any. Whether you don't miss any putting the caulk down, don't miss any that you're smearing it down. And the best way to do that is to have a system that you're going to go through, pause at the end, double check, make sure all the troughs, the valleys are even and clean. Make sure that you haven't missed any before you move on to the next section. You'll be a lot happier. Be patient, don't rush it. It actually goes fairly quickly once you get into your system, once you get into the pattern of how it all goes. But also when you have these repetitive tasks, it's easy to go onto autopilot, and you really don't want to do that here, because you'll find that when you're done, when you finish the product and you're looking up at it, someday you're going to find a mistake you made, and then you're not going to ever be able to unsee it. So take your time now, so that in the end, you're very happy with your final product. Now, that being said, you as the owner of this masterpiece are going to be a lot more critical and notice some of those mistakes much more easily than guests or friends that come around. So don't get too hung up on if you do make a mistake. Well, I have finished the caulking, and I gotta say, I'm really pleased with the outcome. Simply filling the gaps with a color that's the same as the ceiling tile just makes the ceiling seem seamless, appear seamless. And so I think that if you wanted to, you could probably get away without painting, but if you're going to go that route, be really, really meticulous with the application of the caulk, because I don't know if I can show it here, but let's see. If that was visible, where the caulk gets a little sloppy on the edges, it becomes a little more visible. The coat of paint is going to make that pretty much disappear. So whichever way you're going to go, just keep that in mind. And I'm going to reiterate, keep the hole in the caulk really thin, really small, so that you get a very small bead as it goes out. You want to be wiping away as little as possible. You're just trying to make that little gap turn into just a very small valley. And being careful, being meticulous. But yeah, I'm excited to see how it looks painted. I found a more effective method to getting a clean edge out here. If you recall, we need this line on the ceiling to be 2 1/4 inches from the wall. So a better way to approach this is to cut the tile closer to the wall, cut a board 2 1/4 inches wide, lay it against the wall, and then use your sharp cutting implement to cut along the board. Much easier. You still got to cut the ceiling tiles out there at some point, but you don't have to worry so much about the exactness of it. The only thing to be mindful of this is if you've ever done any cutting along a straight edge, you know there's a tendency for the edge or for the cutting implement to drift away from the edge. So be very mindful that you stay tight on this board that you've created so that you don't drift away, because it's going to be difficult to hide bad cuts. It's going to go a whole lot quicker now as I run this along. You saw that I just already, what is that, 4 feet? Maybe 5 feet. How quickly that went. The length of the board that you're going to use, you want to make sure that you can reach one end to the other, because otherwise it adds weight and awkwardness to it as you're trying to hold it in place. So you want to be able to sweep it along. I probably should have cut this one a little bit shorter, but it was a length that I had laying around, and that's why I chose this size. Very easy. Last thing you'll have to do is sometimes the glue, the adhesive, sticks out on the edge. Yeah, it's a lot easier this way. A lot easier to get a straight line and to get the line exactly where you want it on the wall. Because that's the important part. It's the distance off of the wall so that the crown molding will be uniform all the way across. Well, I'm pretty much finished. Really happy with the outcome. I want to take you through a couple things about it. First of all, a moment ago in the video, I had mentioned that, or I showed you a new method of cutting the edges, and I have to say, after having painted and caulked the crown molding, that is a much better method to ensuring an even and straight line here. When I cut the tiles up here, when I'm cutting the individual tiles and trying to take into account the gap that I need for the crown molding, what happens is that sometimes I miss, or you know, I know that, for example, this tile should be 8.5 inches, let's say, and then I cut down and I go down to a few of them down here, and then there's some down here. They should actually be 8 3/4, and so the gap changes. Much more effective to have a straight edge that is the correct distance for the crown molding, and then just go ahead and zip along the line and cut it down. You end up with a very tight gap when you do it that way. So there, I've got about 1/4 inch of a gap, but if I go down to here, right there, more like 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to go back and caulk over it again to make it a little bit smoother, to try and hide that gap in places where it needs to be hidden. But overall, I think it came out really well. I did not go into how to cut crown molding because it's a pretty advanced skill. It does take some time. It's not one that I'm particularly comfortable or effective with. I'm still working on it, and I don't feel like I can coach someone else on how to do it. The alternative to to using crown molding is to do what I did here, which is simply to butt the seam or the edge up against, in this case, the air duct. Now I'm still going to run a little bit of caulk along there so that gap disappears even more. But if you take the time to really cut in a good edge, then it comes out fairly cleanly, as you can see there. I am really happy with how this all turned out. I hope that you'll agree with me that it came out quite nicely. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to like and to subscribe and to share, and good luck with your projects.